Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
What started as a routine segment on The View spiraled into one of the most controversial moments daytime television has seen in years. Joy Behar, never one to hold back, went on a familiar tirade against Donald Trump, mocking his leadership, questioning his character, and ridiculing anyone who still supported him. But then something happened no one expected. Julia Roberts, America's sweetheart, sitting just a few feet away, leaned forward and did the unthinkable. She defended Donald Trump. The audience gasped. Joy Behar froze. And what followed was a cultural clash that rattled the room, sent social media into meltdown, and left Julia Roberts at the center of a storm no Hollywood script could have written. The cameras rolled smoothly inside ABC's The View, the bright lights bouncing across the table where the co-hosts sat, smiles painted on their faces for the opening introductions. Julia Roberts, dressed in a modest cream blouse and her signature wide smile, looked calm, collected, and very much the Hollywood icon everyone knew her to be. She had been invited to promote her latest project, an independent drama film touching on themes of forgiveness and redemption. But as the show's audience would soon learn, the topic of her movie would collide with the hot-button politics the program thrived on. Joy Behar was in her usual mood, sharp-tongued, witty, and clearly eager to spar. She leaned toward Julia with the kind of half-smile that could easily be mistaken for politeness, though longtime viewers recognized it as the calm before a storm. "Julia, it's always wonderful to have you here," Joy began, her tone laced with warmth, but her eyes already scanning for an opening. "You know, I've always admired your films, but I have to ask, your new movie talks about redemption and second chances. Don't you think, in today's world, people are a little too eager to hand out second chances to certain politicians who really don't deserve them?" The audience chuckled knowingly, already anticipating who Joy meant. The name didn't have to be spoken. It hung in the air like a storm cloud. Donald Trump. Julia shifted in her chair, her smile softening but not breaking. "Well, Joy, I think forgiveness and redemption are deeply human themes. Whether you're talking about personal relationships or public life, I believe in the idea that people can grow, change, and learn from mistakes." The other hosts nodded politely, but Joy tilted her head, eyebrows rising. She wasn't about to let this stay vague. "So, let's not dance around it. You're saying Donald Trump deserves redemption? The man's been impeached twice, accused of everything under the sun, and still manages to divide this country. You're seriously saying he deserves a second chance?" A ripple moved through the audience. Some gasped, others murmured, waiting to see if Julia would backtrack. But instead of retreating, Julia leaned in slightly, her voice even but firm. "I'm saying that whether people love him or hate him, he represents something important to millions of Americans. I may not agree with everything he's done or how he's done it, but dismissing him entirely, or worse, mocking the people who still support him, doesn't move us forward. It keeps us stuck." The room shifted. Whoopi raised her brows, Sunny Hostin pursed her lips, and the audience, so used to celebrities lining up to echo Joy's critiques, sat in stunned silence. Joy let out a sharp laugh. "Julia, honey, you're one of the most beloved actresses in America. Why on earth would you defend that man? This isn't about forgiveness, this is about decency, and decency is not his strong suit." Julia's composure never wavered. "Joy, I think decency also means not writing people off completely. I've played characters who've done terrible things, and the whole point of storytelling, of humanity, is that people are complicated. If we can't at least acknowledge that, we lose the chance to have meaningful conversations. And honestly, mocking half the country for who they voted for, that's not decency either." The temperature at the table was rising, though Julia's tone stayed calm, almost disarmingly so. Joy tapped her pen against the desk, a signal that she was gearing up for more. The uneasy tension thickened. Julia hadn't fully planted her flag yet, but the audience could sense where this was headed. The polite smiles were thinning. Sunny glanced nervously at the teleprompter, Whoopi shifted in her chair, and Joy, now visibly itching for a fight, leaned forward once more. So, let me get this straight. You're defending Trump on this show? You want to tell me he deserves our sympathy? Julia didn't flinch. I'm saying he deserves fairness. He deserves the chance to be judged by his actions, not just by outrage. And so do the people who believe in him. The audience reaction was split. Some applauded softly, others booed. What had started as a friendly interview was suddenly turning into one of the most controversial segments the show had hosted in years. And everyone at the table knew they hadn't even reached the boiling point yet. The uneasy silence after Julia's last words lingered like static in the air. The cameras captured every twitch, every glance. Joy Behar leaned back in her chair, folding her arms, lips pursed into the kind of smirk that signaled a verbal storm was about to roll in. "Well," Joy began, her voice sharp and deliberate, "I never thought I'd live to see the day Julia Roberts, America's sweetheart, would come on this show and defend a man who, let's be honest, has spent his career tearing down women, minorities, and the very democracy we live in." The audience erupted in cheers and applause, fueling Joy's confidence. She turned toward Julia like a boxer, sensing her opponent had dropped her guard. "You talk about forgiveness," Joy pressed. "But forgiveness without accountability isn't noble, Julia. It's dangerous. Donald Trump doesn't want forgiveness, he wants power. And defending him, even a little, gives him more of it." Julia didn't flinch. She clasped her hands on the table, leaning slightly forward. Her calmness only magnified the tension. "Joy, I hear you. I do. But here's what I'm saying. People who support Trump, millions of them, feel unseen, unheard, and insulted by shows like this one, by Hollywood, by the media. When we call them stupid, when we roll our eyes, we only deepen that divide. If we can't try to understand why they feel that way, we'll never heal as a country." The crowd murmured. Some clapped in agreement, others booed loudly. The split was visible now, the air inside the studio thick with conflict. Sunny Hostin stepped in, her voice cautious, trying to play mediator. "Julia, I understand your point about empathy, but at what cost? Aren't we, by extending endless empathy, excusing behaviors that undermine democracy? Where's the line?" Julia nodded, her eyes steady. "The line," she said softly but firmly, "is accountability, yes. But accountability doesn't mean demonization. I'm not excusing everything Donald Trump has done. Far from it. I'm saying that if we stop talking to each other, if we dismiss half the country as irredeemable, then we've already lost something much bigger than politics. We've lost the ability to be a nation." The audience shifted again, a tug of war between claps and groans. Joy pounced on the ambiguity. "Oh, please," Joy snapped, throwing her hands up. "You sound like one of those pundits who think unity is possible with fascism. Julia, let me tell you something. Trump doesn't care about you, me, or this country. He cares about Donald Trump. And the fact that you, someone with your influence, are even entertaining this fairness nonsense is outrageous. You're giving cover to a con man." Julia's voice sharpened, though she didn't raise it. "No, Joy, what I'm saying is you're giving cover to division. When you sit here every day mocking his supporters, calling them names, laughing at them, you think you're targeting him, but you're actually targeting ordinary Americans, mothers, fathers, workers, veterans, people who are struggling, who felt he spoke to them when no one else did. And whether we like it or not, that matters. Their voices matter. The audience reaction was explosive. Applause thundered through the room, met with boos that nearly drowned it out. Whoopi, trying to steer the segment back under control, raised her hands. "Ladies, ladies, we gotta take a breath here." But Joy cut in, her voice rising over the noise. "No, Whoopi, I won't take a breath. This is dangerous. Julia, you don't get to waltz in here and tell me Trump's voters deserve more sympathy when women's rights are under attack, when democracy is on the line. That's not decency. That's complicity." Julia's eyes flashed, her composure unbroken, but her tone finally carrying a sting. "And you don't get to sit here, Joy, and pretend that mocking and shaming half the country has done a single thing to help women's rights, or democracy, or anything else. All it's done is deepen the anger and fuel the fire. You call me complicit? I call it cowardly, because it's easier to demonize than it is to try to understand." The audience gasped. The words cowardly hung in the air like a strike of lightning. Joy's face tightened, her jaw set. Whoopi jumped in again, her voice raised over the noise. Okay, we're going to a break, because this is getting too hot." But the moment had already landed. Julia had crossed a line, not in tone, but in boldness. She had gone from carefully suggesting fairness to openly calling out Joy's approach as part of the problem. The polite start was gone. The escalation had arrived. And by the time the cameras cut to commercial, everyone watching knew the next act would be explosive. The commercial break was supposed to cool things down. It didn't. When the cameras came back, the tension was thicker than before. Joy Behar's eyes were locked on Julia like she had unfinished business. Julia, calm but resolute, sat upright, ready to take the hits and give them back. Whoopi, trying to reset the energy, smiled tightly at the camera. "All right, welcome back. We've been talking about division in America, about Donald Trump, about what it means to understand each other. Clearly, it's a passionate conversation. Julia, Joy, you two had a lot to say. Let's continue." Joy wasted no time. "Let's cut to the chase," she said, her voice slicing through the air. "Julia, you're sitting here defending Donald Trump's base. Do you realize what that looks like to women like me, to people of color, to immigrants? It looks like betrayal, plain and simple." The audience clapped and shouted in support. Joy turned, feeding off the energy. Donald Trump didn't just divide this country, he preyed on it. He made cruelty fashionable. He made ignorance a badge of honor. And the people who follow him, they cheer it on. And now here you are, giving them a pass. Julia's lips parted, her jaw tightening. For the first time, her voice trembled, not from weakness, but from sheer conviction. Julia began, her voice steadying as she spoke, "you think I don't know cruelty? Do you think I don't know betrayal? I grew up in a family that wasn't perfect. I've seen people I loved torn apart by anger and bitterness. And what I've learned is this: if all you do is scream at people, label them, shame them, you don't change a thing. You just make them dig in deeper." The audience grew quiet, sensing the shift. Julia leaned forward, her tone intensifying. "Donald Trump, yes, he is flawed. Yes, he has done things I don't agree with. But the people who support him, they're not all monsters. They're our neighbors. They're our co-workers. They're our family. And when you call them irredeemable, you're not fighting Trump. You're tearing this country apart even further." The silence broke with loud applause, but also boos that echoed through the studio. The clash wasn't just on stage anymore. It was in the audience, splitting the room in real time. Joy's face turned red, her voice rising with fury. "You don't get it, Julia. Those people stormed the Capitol. They attacked democracy. They put their loyalty to one man over the Constitution. And you want to sit here and talk about empathy? That's not empathy. That's naivete." Julia's voice rose to meet hers, stronger now, unshaken. "No, Joy. What's naive is thinking that screaming at them, mocking them, erasing them is going to fix any of it. Do you think calling 74 million Americans stupid is going to make them vote differently, or is it just going to make them hate you more?" The audience gasped at the number, 74 million, realizing Julia wasn't pulling back, she was leaning in. Sonny Hostin, clearly rattled, interjected, "Julia, nobody's saying all Trump supporters are irredeemable." "Yes, they are," Julia shot back, her eyes flashing. "Every late-night joke, every segment on shows like this, every headline dripping with contempt, that's the message. And I'm saying it's wrong, it's lazy, it's cowardly, because it's easy to sit here and laugh at people you don't agree with. What's hard is listening. What's hard is meeting them where they are and finding a way forward." The studio was electric. Viewers at home could feel the rawness of Julia's words, like she wasn't just speaking to Joy anymore, she was speaking to the entire country. Joy, visibly shaken, but unwilling to concede, fired back. "You can dress it up however you want, Julia, but history won't forgive people who stood on the sidelines. And whether you like it or not, defending those voters, even with your Hollywood charm, puts you on the wrong side of history." Julia's eyes softened for a moment, but her voice carried the weight of a final blow. "Maybe, Joy, or maybe history will look back and realize that people like you kept pouring gasoline on the fire instead of trying to put it out." The room erupted. Cheers and boos collided like thunder. Whoopi threw her hands in the air, shouting over the chaos, "Okay, that's it, we gotta pause, this is too much, too much." But the moment couldn't be paused. It had already exploded. Julia Roberts, America's sweetheart, had gone head-to-head with Joy Behar in defense of understanding, even for Trump voters. It wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a cultural flashpoint. By the time the segment ended, the studio audience was in open revolt. Half of them were on their feet, cheering Julia's call for empathy. The other half booed so loudly that producers were scrambling to cut to commercial. Whoopi leaned into the chaos, waving her arms, trying to calm the storm. Ladies, please," she begged, her voice nearly drowned out. "We're going to commercial. Don't go anywhere." The cameras cut, but the argument didn't stop. Joy leaned across the table, her voice sharp and low. "You just gave every Trump voter in America a Hollywood endorsement. Do you realize what you've done?" Julia didn't flinch. She met Joy's glare and replied softly but firmly, "I didn't endorse Trump. I defended people. There's a difference, and that's the part you refuse to see." The audience, still buzzing, captured every second on their phones. Clips would hit Twitter before the next commercial even ended. When the show returned, the tension was visible in every body language cue. Joy sat rigid, lips pressed tight, while Julia maintained an almost unnerving composure. Whoopi tried to lighten the mood, but the damage had been done. And outside the studio, the reaction was instantaneous. On Twitter, Julia Roberts' name shot to the top of the trending list within minutes. Clips of her saying, "Calling 74 million Americans stupid won't make them change. It will only make them hate you more," spread like wildfire. Conservatives applauded her, some calling her the only Hollywood star brave enough to speak the truth. Memes of Julia's fiery stare at Joy Behar began flooding Facebook feeds. But just as quickly, backlash hit. Progressive voices, activists, and journalists blasted Julia for platforming Trumpism and gaslighting victims of his policies. One viral tweet read, "Julia Roberts doesn't care about marginalized people. She only cares about comforting Trump voters. Shameful." By afternoon, headlines dominated the digital news cycle. Julia Roberts stunned The View defending Trump voters, Fox News. Joy Behar battles Julia Roberts in heated clash, CNN. America's sweetheart no more. Julia Roberts sparks firestorm, The Hollywood Reporter. Clips of Joy's retort, "Defending those voters puts you on the wrong side of history," were spliced with Julia's counterpunch about pouring gasoline on the fire. It was raw, it was dramatic, and it was everywhere. Meanwhile, the studio couldn't contain the fallout. Audience members leaving the set were split down the middle. Some said Julia was the only one brave enough to bring common sense into the conversation. Others muttered that they'd never watch another Julia Roberts film again. Even Joy, usually quick with quips, looked shaken as the show wrapped up. Backstage, she reportedly muttered, "She's ruined her career, watch." But Julia, walking calmly out of the studio, appeared unfazed. To her, the message had landed exactly as she intended. "If I lose fans for saying we should talk to each other instead of scream, then maybe those weren't really my fans," she told a staffer quietly. By evening, Julia Roberts wasn't just trending. She had become a symbol. For some, she was proof that Hollywood could still connect with real America. For others, she was a reminder of how deep the cultural wounds ran. And Joy Behar? She had become the face of the backlash against Julia, a defender of progressive outrage, but also a lightning rod for criticism that she embodied the very elitism Julia had warned against. What started as a daytime talk show spat had now turned into a national debate, one that wasn't going away anytime soon. The dust didn't settle quickly. For weeks after the broadcast, the Julia Roberts versus Joy Behar clash remained the hottest topic in entertainment and politics alike. The View had seen countless fiery debates, but this one struck a nerve far beyond daytime television. It wasn't just Hollywood versus politics, it was empathy versus outrage, common ground versus condemnation. Julia Roberts, once universally known as America's sweetheart, suddenly found herself in unfamiliar territory, both celebrated and vilified at the same time. Conservatives who had never praised a Hollywood star were suddenly championing her bravery. They circulated her words about compassion for Trump voters like a rallying cry. Meanwhile, progressive voices, many of whom had adored Julia for decades, accused her of betrayal. Some even declared they would never watch Pretty Woman again. But Julia stood firm. In interviews that followed, she doubled down, not on Trump, but on her central point that America's divisions couldn't be healed by ridicule or mockery. "We're tearing each other apart," she told one reporter. "I'm not defending politicians, I'm defending people. And if we can't talk to people we disagree with, what's left of democracy?" Joy Behar, too, found herself reshaped by the exchange. For her loyal fans, she remained a warrior for progressive values, someone unwilling to normalize Trump or his base. But for critics, she became the embodiment of condescension, a symbol of why so many Americans felt dismissed by mainstream media. Clips of her sneering at Julia's defense of empathy were replayed endlessly, fueling arguments that Joy and others like her were part of the cultural divide. The View, ironically, basked in the aftermath. Ratings skyrocketed. The episode became one of the most replayed segments in the show's history, cementing its place in viral culture. But the deeper impact lay in how people discussed it at dinner tables, on talk radio, and across social media. For weeks, Americans asked themselves, should empathy extend to those we disagree with politically? Or is there a line where tolerance becomes complicity? That was Julia's legacy from the clash. Not the defense of a single politician, but the courage to question the way Americans were treating one another. She risked her Hollywood reputation to say something few dared to do, that shouting at each other across the aisle only deepens the wounds. Joy's legacy, meanwhile, was a reminder of how powerful and polarizing absolute conviction can be. She gave voice to the anger many felt, but also exposed how quickly that anger could alienate. In the end, the Roberts-Behar clash wasn't just about Trump. It was about America itself, a reflection of a nation torn between holding firm to values and learning how to listen, even when it hurts. And years from now, when people looked back on this fiery exchange, it wouldn't just be remembered as the day Julia Roberts defended Trump. It would be remembered as the day two women from opposite ends of the cultural spectrum laid bare the raw wounds of a divided nation, live on television in front of millions.